Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast, part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have a returning guest. This may be his fifth time, but there's a reason for that. Dennis Noble. He's part of the Department of Physiology, Anatomy, and Genetics at University of Oxford. He's been involved in science longer than I've been alive. He's had a lot of amazing discoveries, first about the heart and the electrical workings of the heart, put out countless papers. He's into physiology and evolutionary biology, and we're going to talk today about his ideas and thoughts on cancer, because I've noticed whenever I introduce and I interview Dennis, he always has novel ideas and thoughts that I've never thought of. So I think he'll be a great contributor. And Dennis, thanks for coming back.
A great pleasure to talk to you again.
Yeah, excellent. I know, again, cancer may not be your primary focus, but I'm sure you have a lot of good things to say about it. Just before we start, what are your thoughts on cancer? Have you thought about it for a while, or has it kind of been, a side project for you? But, what are your thoughts about it?
Oh, very much a center project at the moment. I'm in the middle of editing a special issue of the journal Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology, entirely devoted to articles, some of them very powerful articles indeed, arising from the meeting in Boston last October on cancer and evolution. Now, that may sound extremely odd. What on earth relationship can there be between the evolution of species to lead to you and me having formed, as it were, from other organisms by the evolutionary process? What conceivable relationship can there be between all of that, which is, of course, Charles Darwin, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, and all the great people who contributed in the early stages to evolutionary biology, and one of the biggest killers of today, that is cancer? And I asked exactly that question myself when I was first asked, probably a few months before the October meeting, would I be happy to contribute to it? And I replied saying, well, I'll tell you the truth, I don't know anything about cancer. Now, they replied, the organizers, saying very simply, you wrote the book, Dance to the Tune of Life. You think it's got nothing to do with cancer. We think it does. Think again. And I now know what they had in mind. They had in mind this, that with late-stage cancer, we are not succeeding very well at all. Once you're at stages 3 and 4, those are the stages where everything is metastasizing. That means growing out into the rest of the body in an uncontrolled way. Our tools are very crude. We either zap people with radiotherapy, or we zap them with chemotherapy. In both cases, of course, we're doing a lot of damage to the tissues themselves, deliberately, because the idea, of course, is that if you can kill the cancer, at least you save the patient. And now I come to the extraordinarily interesting fact about the relationship between the evolutionary process and the evolution of species and that problem with late-stage cancer. What we are doing is what I and many other people have been saying for at least a decade or two, which is that if you zap things in the body with big challenges like radiotherapy or chemotherapy, you cause them to mutate. You actually provoke the mutations in the cancerous tissue, because what is it? It's a growing organism inside another organism. It's taking over. And
that's what I wanted to ask you,
Yeah, that's the problem.
So if I picture one cancer cell sitting there, I picture that versus 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000. At what point do you believe that, quote unquote, enough cancer cells will now start to act as one? Do you think that they act as one even at the point where there's two cells? Or do you think they're kind of rogue for a while?
Yes, no, that's a very good question, Rich. As always, they communicate. And we now know how they communicate. Down the corridor in my department, there's a team that works on what are called exosomes. We've talked about this in previous discussions I've had with you. But let me just briefly say why this is relevant. cancer cells also put out exosomes. And what those exosomes have, these are little packets, very tiny indeed, much smaller than a cell, of some of the control chemicals that determine that this is a heart cell, this is a kidney cell, this is a bone cell, and so on.